Hi, welcome to our very first video for Anthologie Quilt. I'm Melanie Trailer. Today we're starting out with our inspiration collage. It's the very first section of the quilt, and it's written that way on purpose because this part of the pattern really kind of sets the theme of your whole quilt. Your theme doesn't have to be completely spelled out. The idea is to take elements from fabric and collage them all together. This is easiest when you have very large prints, but that is sometimes really hard to find in fabric. So you'll have to kind of try to hopefully find a few prints that are large and then maybe find some little ones as well. You can do no wrong on this. This is just total playtime. So think of it as that way. There's no messing it up. If you are having trouble locating elements in your fabric to use, and when I say elements, I'm talking about like these little flowers that I've cut out and stuff like that. If you're having trouble finding those in your own stash, you could make your own. You can take a solid fabric and make a flower out of it and draw a fabric from that solid. It doesn't have to be exactly the way I've done mine. So really it's just sky is the limit on what you come up with to do and what to use. Another thing that if you've made this quilt with me in the past before, something I've done different is the first time I made the quilt, I had a scene happening in each of these blocks. So every individual block, I made a little collage scene. When I had all 8 of my blocks completed, then I put the whole thing together. This one, I've done a little bit differently. I've put all my blocks together and then I've created the applique scene. I had a lot of trouble coming up with my own theme. So these butterflies right here, I actually cut from little pillows that I bought. So really dig into what you've got to work with. Look and see what's in your house that you don't use or in your fabric stash. Anywhere, anything you use is perfectly fine. Since the pattern is a sampler quilt, it's a really big pattern, I've written everything to suit raw edge applique. I know there's a lot of quilters who do not like raw edge, so if you are such a quilter, please do your own thing. There's nothing wrong with you slowing this whole thing down and hand sewing it away. So in the video, this is not really an instructional video. This is more about you watching me work and then hopefully inspire you. And I wanted it to feel kind of like we were quilting together. So hopefully that works out. We'll see how this goes. This is the first time I've ever done videos this way. All right, so enough of me rambling, let's get started. So like I mentioned a few minutes ago, the last time I made this quilt, I didn't put this whole bottom section together like I've got it now. I just started with each of the blocks. So I would take one block, I would do a small applique scene on it. I had that going on in each of my blocks. And my appliques were tiny and my scenes were tiny. So, but this time I wanted to mix it up. This is only my second time making this quilt, but I went ahead and I put all the inspiration collage blocks together. So I got one big, huge piece that I can play with appliques. I was going through all of my fabrics looking for the right applique, and I wasn't finding anything just really big, and I just wanted something really, really big. I wasn't finding anything I wanted, and what I wanted was just something really big to cover this space. So I went looking around and I found some pillows, and I decided that I can cut these butterflies out of these pillows and stitch them to the background. I don't know, I've got 4 pillowcases here. I don't know if I'll be able to, I know for sure I won't be able to use all 4 of these, but look at these butterflies. This is going to be so pretty, just giant appliques. I'm hoping I can get at least 2 on here, but I don't know for sure. So I'm gonna get my butterflies removed from the pillowcases, get them all cut out. Well, I'm gonna cut out at least 2 of them, figure out which ones I want to use in my quilt. So what you'll wanna do is just kind of go through your stash, see what you got, or if you can do something like what I'm doing is just, you know, don't dig in your stash and look for other items that you can use. Maybe your grandmother has left you some doilies that you want to put in here, maybe some embroidery work that you could cut out and somehow put onto your quilt top. There's so many options, so many different ways to go. It's really just playtime, but I'm gonna get my butterflies cut out. I am really excited about this. So we're all cut out, and this isn't my original idea. My original idea was for the corner of this block to just have all these butterfly appliques just kind of scattering, some different sizes, but they were going to be smaller. But the problem is I could never find like maybe a 6 by 6 inch butterfly, so I'm left with these big ones. And even though that wasn't exactly my original idea, I'm just going to roll with it because that's all we can do, right? So I've got this one pinned down, and I think this one is going to go right here. I think I could probably fit another, but I think I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave it like this. Because these pillowcases were made with linen, I'm not going to worry about using the applique methods that are in the pattern a lot, because they're kind of a little bit thicker and they're a little bit rough. So what I'm thinking is I could probably stitch on these with just my machine and it'd be perfectly fine. I don't think it's gonna frumple up like it does when you don't use your interfacing or adhesive, and they're pretty stiff too, so it's almost like they're already interfaced, or it has that feel to it. So I think I'm gonna go around these with a machine stitch. I cut off their little antennas because they were just so thin, and I think what I'm gonna do is embroider them back on. So let me get this machine stitched and then I'll show you. All right, I am all stitched down. And now I'm gonna start thinking about, I'm gonna save the embroidery that I mentioned for later, and I'm gonna start thinking about other parts of this section that I wanna do. And I'd like to have this section that runs across this bottom, I would like to have it like a bunch of flower appliques. So I'm gonna go and collect some fabrics for my flowers, and then I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna collage it together. All right. So instead of looking at like the background of some of these fabrics, which aren't gonna match the pieces that I've got planned for this quilt, I'm just looking at the actual individual fabrics. So like on this one, this is a good one. I'm not using any plum purple in my quilt, but that's okay because the flower is golden pink, and that is a color that I'm using in the quilt. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go through and cut out some of these, cut out squares of these florals that I wanna use for that bottom part. And I'm gonna get it backed with my heat and bond, which is what I'm gonna use for this section. And if you have never used heat and bond before, there's a whole video tutorial on how to use it. I'm gonna do that for all of these. I've got everything cut out the way I want it. Then I will show you what we're gonna do with it. I've probably cut too many, but I was really in the zone there with my scissors, just getting at it. A few tips about this is I'm using the heat and bond. You may be using something different, but there are parts of it where I went in there and cut a small square from the fabric, and I pressed it to the heat and bond, and then I went in there and I cut a bit of a closer cut. And then there was other fabrics where there was just so much that I could get that I took a whole fat quarter, pressed it to the heat and bond, and then just cut out all kinds of bits and bobs. Just because you're going in there to get the big flower doesn't mean that there's not tons of little bitty tiny flowers that you can also get. And that's really cute, isn't it? So just something to think about. Also, you can go in there and you can cut very precisely, or you can go in there and just not cut so precisely. Doesn't really matter. So just do what you want to do. Don't let anything stress you out. This is meant to be play. It's meant to be fun. Since I've got the heat and bond on all these, I'm gonna go through and pull off the back of each of these so I can have my appliques ready for pressing. So I am ready to start collaging. So here's the way I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking that these are my main. That's why I went ahead and plugged them in, because I know for sure that I want these. It's everything else that I'm not for sure exactly how I want things to look. So I've cut a whole bunch of the appliques. They've all been backed by the heat and bond. Their paper's been pulled off, and these are ready for me to just start pressing down. Before I do that, I want to get them in a sort of collage look where they look like maybe the butterflies are kind of coming out of a bed of flowers. I want to start with the big pieces first, and then move on to the little pieces. once I got the big pieces where I think I'm gonna want them. I'm gonna play around with this for quite a bit, and I'm not going to be pressing anything until I've got everything laid down exactly the way I want it. When I have it laid down, that's when I'm going to press. Let's just start playing. Alright, I just want to be sure that everything, I want it to look a little wild, which is why I did so many and so many different kinds. I really like these shoots that are going off. I really love that one. If you did want to do this part with your hand, don't put the heat and bond or interfacing for that matter. Just put your fabric down and then stitch around it with just plain fabric. But since I am going to do this by machine, it's perfectly fine for me to use one of the heat and bond or the interfacing. And I think I'm really liking the way this looks. So now that I've got it where I want it, once it's on there, it's on there. So I want to just take a minute and really think about if I like it or not. And I think I've got this where I want it. So now I just take my iron and I'm just going to start pressing. And I want to be careful that I am not moving any of these into little, I'm not accidentally pressing these into little folds. I'm really getting my iron just up and down on the pieces. So I'm all pressed. These aren't going anywhere. So there's a reason why I chose the heat and bond method. And my reason is because I knew I was going to make my collage look wild. and I don't want to go through and stitch all this down. You may be doing yours different, and you may be stitching this piece by piece by piece. That's perfectly fine. You could be using a whole different method of applique than me, but I chose the heat and bond specifically so that I didn't have to stitch this down. And my plan is that when I get my whole quilt top finished and I'm quilting it, I'm going to machine quilt all over this to make everything permanently settled onto the quilt top. So that's my plan. Now, as I'm working on this quilt top, I learned this the last time I made this quilt and I worked with this heavy of an applique. As I'm working on this quilt top, little tiny pieces may start to peel up, and that's gonna happen, and it's okay. Just take your iron and press them back down. So I'm not gonna worry too much about that. I'm just gonna kind of keep an eye on it as I work on it. All that's left for me to do is my antennas. So I'm gonna do that, and then we'll be done. This shouldn't take me too long, and I'm just gonna eyeball it. So let me get my hoop in here. If you've never embroidered before, there's a tutorial on the blog with a post that's all about hand embroidery. And I like to use, I got my needle in my mouth, that's why I'm talking funny. I like to use a number 8 DMC cotton balls. We've got these in the shop too. And I'm just going to stop talking now and let you see a sped up version. My embroidery is done. They look like butterflies again. Alright, so I am complete over here. My giant applique section. Yours may end up being really small or really thin and wide. Really, there's no wrong you can do. Just be creative and use your imagination, and I hope you enjoyed making this with me. I cannot wait to see what you do, so please post on Instagram and tag me at Southern Charm Quilts and use the hashtag Anthologie Quilt. The anthology is spelled with an IE on the end, not a Y. I want to see what you make, so I will see you next time.